Haji, so what are we talking about today?
Well, I think we discussed this before. Let's talk about a question that I have.
Okay.
It's a question that's troubling me. And like in the past, we've always kind of bounced off our financial decisions on each other just to get a second point of view. We thought it was a good idea to make a recording of this because one, if people have the kind of question that I have, hopefully it'll shed some light on what they can do in a similar position. But more importantly, give viewers of this video just a glimpse of how you should go about making a financial decision, right?
Sure.
So the question that I have, and I kind of told you this a couple of days back, is that I have some liquidity right now. It's a sizable amount of liquidity. I have an ongoing home loan, and I'm torn as to what to do with this liquidity, because very clearly, one of the things I can do is to use this money and prepay a part of my home loan,
Right.
thereby reducing the entire impact of interest, etc., reducing the tenure. The second, of course, is to invest this money, keep it liquid with me, and then take this call of prepaying slightly further down the road. There's a rational part of me, there's an emotional part of me. I'm very, very conflicted on what to do. Although I'm leaning towards one particular decision. But I want to stop here. I want to ask you, how should I think about it? Because you're privy to some of my financial details, right?
Sure. So let me expand the question a little bit, right? Because the position you are in is similar to the position of somebody who has, for example, a student loan, has started working, finished a year, got a bonus and saying, I've got this money that has come in. Should I use it to repay my student loan, or should I invest it? Somebody who has either a student loan or a home loan could also be in a similar situation saying, so I've got some money coming in, I'm able to save a little bit of money every month. Should I just use it to just, reduce this loan as much as possible, right? So those are all very similar situations to be in. There are, from a technical perspective, there are several aspects or several ways of dealing with this. So if you came to us, if somebody watching this video came to us and said, look, this is my situation, and I would urge people who are watching this, if they have this kind of question, they should reach out to us and chat with us. There would be several questions we'd ask them, right? We'd try and understand their specific situation, what this loan means, what this money means to them in their financial overall situation. We'd also look at the situation of the loan itself, right? So what kind of interest rate is it carrying? What kind of tenure is left? Should you repay to reduce the principal amount? Should you repay to reduce the tenure? So technically, there'd be lots of discussion that would happen. And technically, you discuss things like inflation and interest rates and interest rate cycles and all of that, right? So I don't want to get into that. Let me talk about something which is somewhat straightforward to appreciate and understand for anybody who's watching this, which is the balance between the psychological or the emotional aspect, which drives you to this question, which is typically saying, I'm not very happy carrying a loan, so I want to kind of get it off my head, right? So that's the emotional, psychological aspect of it. And the second aspect of it, which is very important from a financial perspective, is liquidity, right? I have this money. The minute you use it to repay a loan or you put it into your house, it becomes illiquid. Now, one could argue that you could go and take a loan against property, and so you could do a bunch of stuff. But fact of the matter is, you've got a certain amount of money sitting in a bank account. You could use that and repay a loan. You would lose liquidity. So I want to talk about this situation from using the lens of liquidity only, right? There are several other aspects, there are several other variables that need to be discussed, and there is no one answer that fits everybody.
Sure.
But there's an extreme situation that fits everybody, which is to say, if this is all the liquidity that you have, then you certainly should not use it to pay off your loan. So for instance, I have a client who had an education loan running, had built up a bit of savings and was very keen to get rid of this education loan. and she had studied overseas. She had a foreign MBA, foreign loan. Said, look, I've got this money. I just wish I could just repay my education loan and be done with it, right? It's no longer on my head. And I said, yeah, but you're in a foreign country. Here is a bit of liquidity that you have. You can use all of it up and repay your loan. And then you basically got no cash left. And God forbid something happens. You lose your job, you have to come back to India, etc., etc. That's not an ideal situation to be in, right? So the point I'm trying to make is there are several factors that go into this conversation, and it's not a straightforward, output, right? This is a discussion that needs to be had.
Sure.
But the one thing that is very clear in my mind, at least, is that you should not give up on liquidity to reduce your emotional or psychological burden of the loan. Because what you're doing is you're creating potential problems down the road, but God forbid something goes wrong. Now, you may have a smaller amount of loan, but now you don't have liquidity and you're now in a tight financial situation. Right?
So, right. I agree with that. In fact, we've spoken about this a couple of times. There is also, and permit me to get slightly technical. Right?
Yeah.
There's also a mathematical construct which one needs to look at. So if I look today in particular, the interest that I'm paying on my home loan is at around, it's a shade under 7%.
Right.
I do know that inflation, while the official estimates of inflation are probably at 5.5%, we're all starting to feel the pinch of inflation. I think it's significantly north of 5.5%, which effectively means that while I'm paying 6.5–7% on my home loan, every subsequent year I'm paying back less and less real money, because the value of what I'm paying back is eroding faster than the interest that I'm paying. Yeah. That, to me at least, because I would also like to look at it mathematically, is a strong case for me to continue with the loan.
Yeah.
Right? Because while I am paying the EMI and paying back the loan, effectively I'm paying back less. However, one of the points that you raised earlier, which is the entire emotional aspect, right? And you made a very strong point that you shouldn't let liquidity, liquidity trumps emotion, right? Basically, very, very, very simply. How do you kind of balance the mathematics of it and the emotion of it? Because for me, those are conflicting factors. The mathematics suggests that I continue with the home loan.
Yeah.
Emotional overhang tells me to kind of prepay as much as I can. And mind you, on the liquidity part, for me in particular, I do have adequate liquidity. So it's not as if I use this money to prepay my loan, I'm in a tricky spot. And let's hope that the viewers of this video are also, at least the majority of them, are not in a tricky spot. Yeah. How do you find a balance between what the math is telling you and your essential character, which in my case is, I don't like debt?
Sure. So two things that I would say to somebody like you who came to me. One, I would say is, don't think in terms of binaries. Don't think in terms of zeros and ones. Don't think in terms of extreme options, right? So you've got a home loan of, let's say, 50 lakhs. You got a 10 lakh windfall. You say, I'm going to use 10 lakhs to repay my home.
Yeah.
The decision is not between not paying the loan, not repaying the loan from this money, or using all of 10 lakhs. You could have an in-between solution as well. You could pick a number in the middle saying 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs, 5 lakhs. I'll do something. What that does is it satisfies your emotional animal. There's a very interesting book, I've forgotten the name, but it talks about how we have a lizard brain, right? As we evolved, there is this very instinctual way of thinking, because the brain first evolved the very instinctual way of thinking, which is the lizard brain. And then we evolved this very conscious, thought through, I think Daniel Kahneman calls it, 1 and 2 for some reason. Anyway, so the point being, you don't have to do 0 and 1. You could choose somewhere in the middle and saying, I will repay a little bit because it makes me happy. The other thing that I would say to somebody in your shoes is to say, look, I know that culturally, a lot of us are brought up with this idea of how loans are bad, right? It's toxic. It's a bad product. You shouldn't have it. No, you shouldn't take on loans. That's not necessarily the case. Some loans are actually good for you. Yeah. I believe a home loan is good for you. I believe an education loan can be good for you. It helps you build up towards something which is either a career, which is great, or it fulfills an emotional need in the case of a house, which is not easy to just go out and buy a house like that, right? So you may want to buy a house now, you don't have the money, the home loan allows you to do that. And it's an important thing to do in your life, right? You and I, we don't go around telling people, don't buy a house, right? We tell people, don't think of your house as an investment. So going back to the loan idea, right? Number one, don't deal in binaries, don't deal in ones and zeros. Think about an in-between solution. It's sometimes possible, and it may give you a little bit of comfort. Number two, you've got to stop thinking about loans as good and bad. Some loans are bad, right? Having a credit card debt is just bad, no question about it. But not all loans are made equal. So it's important also to understand that. And sometimes having a conversation with people like you and me can help sometimes clarify that issue.
I wanted to, I withheld what I was leaning toward from you. And I'm so glad you said take the middle path, because that's exactly what I intend to do.
Have I stolen your thunder?
No, you haven't. And I'll tell you why. I thought that because I'm taking a mid path, and I typically don't like mid paths, right? I like to commit to a particular decision.
Yeah.
The mid path always makes me believe that I've taken the easy way out and I've fundamentally not taken a decision, right? I've done a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Yeah. But you're right. The minute one thinks of it with the construct of, listen, I have this emotional need, and my mind is telling me something else. Why not do a little bit of both and at least sleep more peacefully? Because I think that's the agenda, right? The agenda is that nothing should keep you up at night. To me, had I done, let's assume we stay with your example and say I had a 50 lakh loan and I had a 10 lakh rupee windfall. Had I done either of the two extreme cases, I would have had a sleepless night, right? Yeah. Because of the missed opportunity or having made the wrong decision. So kind of hedging your thing just, I think, would work better for me, I guess. I hope so.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Thanks for that. That really helped. And I'll probably kind of execute this over the next couple of days.